Last week, we began a shift away from just focusing on Israel and biblical history to being a little bit more aware of the bigger events that were going on in the world. And for this week and the next couple weeks we do this, we won't next week, of course, because of Easter, but we're going to be continuing to use the Bible as our primary source, looking at the very last events that the Old Testament records. And going back just a little bit, remember in 722 BC, I'm sure you all remembered that number. I didn't. The northern kingdom of Israel was defeated and dispersed by the Assyrians. And when that happened, they left a very small number of Israelites in the land. And they didn't just move Israelites out, they moved other people in, because they didn't want the land to just go desolate. They wanted it to still be a prosperous place. They just upset the society that was there. And 2 Kings chapter 17, starting in verse 24. 2 Kings 17, 24. And the king of Assyria brought men from Babylon and from Cutha and from Ava and Hamath and Sepharvaim, and settled them in the cities of Samaria in place of the sons of Israel. So they possessed Samaria and lived in its cities. Now it happened at the beginning of their settlement there that they did not fear Yahweh. So they didn't worship him, they didn't acknowledge him. Therefore, Yahweh sent lions among them, which were killing them. And I think we can say pretty safely that this artwork is an exaggeration. I'm sure it wasn't quite to that extent, but people were experiencing lion attacks, and it was just worse than it should have been. Bad enough that they recognized, okay, we're doing something wrong here. There's a divine reason that this is happening. So they spoke to the king of Assyria, saying, "The nations whom you have taken away into exile and settled in the cities of Samaria do not know the custom of the God of the land. So he has sent lions among them. And behold, they are putting them to death, because they do not know the custom of the God of the land." And of course, this was their worldview, right? Yahweh was there. He ruled that place. If they were there, they needed to recognize him. They needed to know how to please him, how to appease him. Then the king of Assyria commanded, saying, "Take there one of the priests whom you took away into exile, and let him go and live there, and let him instruct them in the custom of the God of the land." So one of the priests whom they had taken away into exile from Samaria came and settled at Bethel, and instructed them how they should fear Yahweh. So not the greatest, most qualified teacher. If he was a priest in the northern kingdom, he's not necessarily orthodox. He's part of that false system that Jeroboam set up, right? So they're not getting the greatest training in how to properly fear Yahweh to begin with. But in verse 29, each nation was still making gods of its own, and put them in the houses of the high priests, which the people of Samaria had made, each nation in the cities in which they lived. Down in verse 32, they were also fearing Yahweh, and appointed from among all of themselves priests of the high places. and they were acting for them in the houses of the high places. So their own people became their priests, some of them priests of Yahweh. They were fearing Yahweh and serving their own gods, according to the custom of the nations from among whom they had been taken away into exile. So this turned into what's known as a syncretistic religion, a religion that brings together parts of different faiths. And with the way that they viewed things, their polytheism, this was a very natural thing for them to do. They just started worshiping Yahweh alongside the idols they brought with them from all the places they had come from. So, with that as a little bit of a background for what we'll see later, last week we looked at the dream of Nebuchadnezzar, the kingdoms that were going to come, and before this point there was Assyria that was the biggest bad nation in the world. They're not part of this picture. They were never the force that Babylon was. They were never the successful empire that Babylon became. They were basically just a bully that picked on smaller nations and made them pay tribute to them. But after Babylon came the Medes and the Persians, Medo-Persia, and then we're going to see later, after them, comes Greece, later Rome, and then we get into things that haven't happened yet with the kingdom of the Antichrist destroyed and replaced by the kingdom of God. And in Daniel chapter 5, we saw King Belshazzar, who wasn't really the king of Babylon at this time, but he was the acting king. His father was very into just building projects and various things around the kingdom, and not very often in the capital itself. But the real king's name was Nabonidus. At this time, there were a few kings, a good number actually, in a short time between Nebuchadnezzar and Nabonidus. But at the time of Babylon's fall, the main king in Babylon itself, the city of Babylon, was Belshazzar. And Babylon itself fell without a fight. The Persians redirected the Euphrates River. They made it so that there was a dry river bed going into the city, and they marched under the city walls in that riverbed into the city and took it after officially the Empire of Babylon had been defeated in the field anyway. So on that night, Belshazzar was killed. And we remember at that feast that he was holding, he was using the holy vessels that Nebuchadnezzar had taken from the temple. But here's a little bit of the information we have. This is a cylinder. Specifically, it's a foundation cylinder. What they would do when they built a significant building is in the foundation, they would have an inscription on one of these things, and they would store it there. And when you tore down the building later to make something else, you could have a record of what that building was, who built it, and why. And this is a photo from the British Museum, and it says their clay foundation cylinders were placed inside the walls of buildings as a record of a king's achievements. The cylinder describes, this cylinder right here, describes the rebuilding of a ziggurat, so a pyramid-shaped temple, by Nabonidus, the last king of Babylon. Nabonidus here prays for his son Belshazzar, who ruled Babylon while he was away. So That's the cylinder of Nabonidus. And let's go to Jeremiah 29. And we've been here before. If somebody just wants to go there and read for us verse 1 and verse 10, give us a reminder of Jeremiah chapter 29.
Now these are the words of the letter which Jeremiah the prophet sent from Jerusalem to the elders of Israel, the priests, the prophets, and all the people whom Nebuchadnezzar had taken away to exile from Jerusalem and Babylon. Thus says Yahweh, in the 70 years of the fulfillment of Babylon, I will visit you and establish my good word for you.
And that promise of 70 years was verse 10, right? Yep. So Daniel was part of this group that this letter is addressed to. He would have been very familiar with it. And then we see over in Daniel chapter 9. And I'll go here as well and read this one. And Daniel's away from the historical books and over in the prophets. All right, Daniel chapter 9, verse 1. In the first year of Darius, the son of Ahasuerus, from the seed of the Medes, who was made king over the kingdom of the Chaldeans, in the first year of his reign, I, Daniel. Okay, so before I go on from there, first of all, from the time reference, I mentioned this briefly last week. The king of Persia at the time that Babylon was taken over was Cyrus the Great. But Darius, it says in the Belshazzar account, received the kingdom at that time. And here we have that stated again and a little more specifically. So Darius was a Mede, and the Persians were the ones really in charge, but Darius was a Mede who was made king. He didn't make himself king, he was made king over the kingdom of the Chaldeans. So the land that actually belonged to the Babylonians themselves, not the other lands that they had conquered, not the whole empire, just the kingdom of the Chaldeans, which would include the city of Babylon. So it's easy to get the impression, reading the book of Daniel, that Darius was the greatest king, the ruler of the entire Medo-Persian Empire. But that's not what we know from history or what we find when we carefully read the account. So, in the first year of Darius's reign, though, I, Daniel, in verse 2, discerned in the books the number of the years concerning which the word of Yahweh came to Jeremiah the prophet for the fulfillment of the laying waste of Jerusalem, namely 70 years. So I gave my face to the Lord God to seek him by prayer and supplications, with fasting, sackcloth, and ashes. So Daniel prays to God, and based on the promise God had made to bring them back after 70 years, Daniel prays, asks for forgiveness for the nation and for himself, and appeals to God to keep that promise and restore them to the land. And that happens very soon after he prays this. Cyrus the Great, one of the first things he did when he took over the whole kingdom was liberated captives. And he didn't just do this for the Israelites. Actually, he did this for all peoples, and it's what made him such a well-liked and successful king. Starting out, this is how you ought to behave when you're taking over somebody else's empire. This is the Cyrus cylinder, which has been found And this cylinder recounts the conquest of Babylon in 539 BC, and it confirms the decree given by Cyrus, king of Persia, allowing exiles to return to their homes in order to rebuild their temples. And we have recorded in Scripture his decree regarding the Israelites specifically, but there were other decrees made as well. Other people groups had been moved around, and Cyrus allowed them to go home and begin worshiping their own gods in their own places. And we saw last week the exile was something anticipated as far back as Deuteronomy. Moses said this is going to happen. And the return was also looked forward to even back then and talked about by Moses himself in Deuteronomy chapter 30. In Deuteronomy chapter 30, verses 1 through 6. So it will be when all of these things have come upon you, the blessing and the curse which I have set before you, and you cause these things to return to your heart in all the nations where Yahweh your God has banished you, and you return to Yahweh your God and listen to his voice with all your heart and soul, according to all that I am commanding you today, you and your sons, then Yahweh your God will return you from captivity and return his compassion on you, and he will gather you again from all the peoples where Yahweh your God has scattered you. If those of you who are banished are at the ends of the sky, from there Yahweh your God will gather you, and from there he will take you back. And Yahweh your God will bring you into the land which your fathers possessed, and you shall possess it. And he will prosper you and multiply you more than your fathers. Moreover, Yahweh your God will circumcise your heart and the heart of your seed, to love Yahweh your God with all your heart and with all your soul, so that you may live. And this is something that comes up again and again and again in the prophets. The idea of return to the land is put together with the idea of a return to God, a spiritual restoration of Israel, which happened in a small way in actual history, and we're going to see that, but not in the great permanent way that it someday will. So even in these prophecies of returns to the land, there is a strong element that is still future, even today. But where we're really going to camp out this morning, with whatever time we have left, is the book of Ezra. Right after 1st and 2nd Chronicles. And the book of Ezra begins in the same way that the book of 2nd Chronicles ends. And there's a very good chance that the book of Ezra / Nehemiah, because they were originally one book, that author is the same author that compiled the books of Chronicles. All right, in Ezra, chapter 1, just the beginning of the book. Now, in the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, in order to complete the word of Yahweh from the mouth of Jeremiah, Yahweh stirred up the spirit of Cyrus, king of Persia, so that he had a proclamation passed throughout all his kingdom, and also put it in writing, saying, Thus says Cyrus, king of Persia, Yahweh, the God of heaven, has given me all the kingdoms of the earth, And he has appointed me to build him a house in Jerusalem, which is in Judah. Whoever there is among all you, you of all his people, may his God be with him. Let him go up to Jerusalem, which is in Judah, and rebuild the house of Yahweh, the God of Israel. He is the God who is in Jerusalem. So everyone who remains, at whatever place he may sojourn, let the men of that place support him with silver and gold, with goods and cattle, together with a freewill offering for the house of God, which is in Jerusalem. So go back, rebuild the temple. If you're staying where you are, provide for the people who are going back. And something else that happens at this time in verse 7, also King Cyrus brought out the articles of the house of Yahweh, which Nebuchadnezzar had brought out from Jerusalem and put in the house of his gods. So we've seen these vessels travel. They were taken from Jerusalem. They were used by Belshazzar in his feast, and now King Cyrus is sending them back to be in the temple once again. Let's go over to chapter 3. And just kind of get a bird's eye view of this process of restoration. In Ezra chapter 3, then the 7th month came, and the sons of Israel were in the cities, and the people gathered together as one man to Jerusalem. Then Jeshua, the son of Jozadak, he's called Joshua elsewhere, same guy, Jeshua, the son of Jozadak, and his brothers, the priests, and Zerubbabel, the son of Shealtiel, and his brothers, arose and built the altar of the God of Israel to burn offerings on it, to offer burnt offerings on it, as it is written in the law of Moses, the man of God. So before the actual temple was constructed, the first thing they did was they built the altar. They began to offer sacrifices. They established the system of worship and just slowly built the temple around it. Down in verse 8, now in the 2nd year of their coming to the house of God at Jerusalem, in the 2nd month, Zerubbabel, the son of Shealtiel, and Jeshua, the son of Jozadak, and the rest of their brothers, the priests, and the Levites, and all who came from the captivity to Jerusalem, began the work, and appointed the Levites from 20 years and older to direct the work of the house of Yahweh. Then Jeshua, with his sons and brothers, stood united with Kadmiel and his sons, and the sons of Judah and the sons of Henadad with their sons and brothers, the Levites, to direct those who do the work in the house of God. So the builders laid the foundation of the temple of Yahweh. Then the priests stood in their apparel with trumpets, and the Levites, the sons of Asaph, with cymbals, to praise Yahweh according to the directions of King David of Israel. That is interesting. We saw on Wednesday, we read a psalm of Asaph, and he was specifically in charge of cymbals at this time. And that's still a thing with his descendants. The sons of Asaph with cymbals praised Yahweh according to the directions of King David of Israel. And they sang, praising and giving thanks to Yahweh, saying, for he is good, for his loving kindness endures forever upon Israel. And all the people shouted with a great shout when they praised Yahweh, because the foundation of the house of Yahweh was laid. Yet many of the priests and Levites and heads of fathers' households, the old men who had seen the first house of Yahweh, were weeping with a loud voice when the foundation of this house was laid before their eyes. while many, in loud shouts with gladness, were raising their voice, so that the people could not distinguish the voices of the shouting of gladness from the voices of the weeping of the people. For the people were shouting with a loud voice, and those voices were heard far away. So those who had seen the temple before, when they saw the foundation, when they saw how big it was going to be, were not impressed. They realized they weren't getting back what they hoped that they were, that it wasn't going to be the same. In chapter 4, then the adversaries of Judah and Benjamin heard that the people of the exile were building a temple to Yahweh, the God of Israel. So they approached Zerubbabel and the heads of fathers' households and said to them, "Let us build with you, for we, like you, seek your God. And we have been sacrificing to him since the days of Esarhaddon, king of Assyria, who brought us up here." Okay, so who are these people specifically? Right. Yes, these people who have been worshiping Yahweh this whole time, alongside their other gods, the new inhabitants of the northern kingdom, in other words, are the ones coming here and asking Zerubbabel, let us build with you. Let us have a part in this project to rebuild the house of God. But Zerubbabel and Jeshua and the rest of the heads of the fathers' households of Israel said to them, "You have nothing in common with us in building a house to our God. But we ourselves will together build to Yahweh, the God of Israel, as King Cyrus, the king of Persia, has commanded us." So the people of the land discouraged the people of Judah and dismayed them from building. And what we see next is a pretty detailed description of how they did that, the letters that were sent back and forth trying to get the work stopped. And the issue of the temple was a bone of contention, and it was a problem between the people of Judah and the people of Samaria for a long time after this. And remember these people, the Samaritans, as they came to be called. This isn't the last time they'll become important, especially in connection with temple worship. So let's hop over to the last reference I have there, down in the end of chapter 4. The end of chapter 4. Did I say 24 or 4? Verse 23 and 24. Then as soon as the copy of King Artaxerxes' document was read, so this is the decree, to stop the building. As soon as the copy of King Artaxerxes' document was read before Rehem and Shimshai the scribe and their colleagues, they went in haste to Jerusalem to the Jews and stopped them by force and military. Then the work of the house of God in Jerusalem stopped, and it was stopped until the 2nd year of the reign of Darius, king of Persia. So, with that as background, let's go over to Haggai, one of the minor prophets near the end of the Old Testament. Micah, Zephaniah, Haggai. Very short book. The work stopped until the 2nd year of the reign of Darius, king of Persia. And this is not Darius the Mede, just to be clear. This is another Darius, Darius king of Persia. And there were multiple Darius kings of Persia. As well, but Darius the Mede was not Darius the first of Persia. All right, book of Haggai begins in the 2nd year of Darius the king. On the 1st day of the 6th month, the word of Yahweh came by the hand of Haggai the prophet to Zerubbabel, the son of Shealtiel, governor of Judah, and to Joshua, the son of Jozadak, the high priest, saying, Thus says Yahweh of hosts, this people says, the time has not come, even the time for the house of Yahweh to be rebuilt. Then the word of Yahweh came by the hand of Haggai the prophet, saying, Is it time for you yourselves to live in your paneled houses while this house lies waste? So he's condemning them for not continuing the work, for allowing themselves to be stopped. And he's saying you need to continue. Regardless of the opposition, you need to be faithful to God and the work that he has put before you to do. You need to honor him, even if it means risking your own safety and comfort. So down in verse 13, then Haggai, the messenger of Yahweh, spoke by the commissioned message of Yahweh to the people, saying, I am with you, declares Yahweh. So Yahweh stirred up the spirit of Zerubbabel, the son of Shealtiel, governor of Judah, and the spirit of Joshua, the son of Jozadak, the high priest, and the spirit of all the remnant of the people, and they came and did the work on the house of Yahweh of hosts, their God, on the 24th day of the 6th month, in the 2nd year of Darius the king. So God promised to be with them, to protect them, and that gave them the courage to continue the work, even though technically they weren't allowed to at that time. And he also, in verses 1 through 9 of chapter 2, talks to those among the remnant of the people. In verse 3, he says, Who among you remains who saw this house in its former glory? And how do you see it now? Does it not seem like nothing in your eyes? And this was another reason the building had stopped. Another thing that they needed to have fixed is their attitude. They weren't motivated. They were double-minded about the whole project because they realized that it wasn't going to be as great as they wanted it to be. But now in verse 4, be strong, Zerubbabel, declares Yahweh. Be strong also, Joshua, son of Jehozadak, the high priest, and all you people of the land. Be strong, declares Yahweh, and work, for I am with you, declares Yahweh of hosts. As for the promise which I cut with you when you came out of Egypt, my spirit is standing in your midst. Do not fear. For thus says Yahweh of hosts, once more, in a little while, I am going to shake the heavens and the earth, the sea also and the dry land, and I will shake all the nations, and they will come with the desirable things of all nations, and I will fill this house with glory, says Yahweh of hosts. The silver is mine, and the gold is mine, declares Yahweh of hosts. The latter glory of this house will be greater than the former, says Yahweh of hosts. And in this place I will give peace, declares Yahweh of hosts. So they're part of something that's going to be greater than the past. And this house, this temple, was aggrandized. It was made greater, and we're going to see that when we get there, by Herod the Great, actually. And then it was destroyed in AD 70 by the Romans. But there will be another temple. The temple that Ezekiel saw in his vision has never been built yet, and the glory of that temple will be greater still. And even this temple, Zerubbabel's temple, had the honor of being visited by Christ himself. The other prophet who prophesied at this time, and you see them both mentioned in Ezra chapter 5. Let me just flip back there. In Ezra 5, verses 1 and 2, it says, "And the prophets, Haggai the prophet, and Zechariah the son of Iddo, prophesied to the Jews who were in Judah and Jerusalem in the name of the God of Israel, who was over them. Then Zerubbabel the son of Shealtiel and Jeshua the son of Jozadak arose and began to rebuild the house of God which is in Jerusalem. And the prophets of God were with them, supporting them." So these two prophets, Haggai and Zechariah, were instrumental in getting this work to move forward, in giving the people the strength and encouragement they needed during this time. And the book of Zechariah also begins very much like Haggai. In the 8th month of the 2nd year of Darius, the word of Yahweh came to Zechariah the prophet, the son of Berechiah, the son of Iddo. And the first thing he does is remind them of what happened to their fathers, how their fathers were unfaithful and were taken out of the land, and encouraging them to be faithful to God in light of all that they have learned from the past. And Zechariah sees a vision. In verse 8, "I saw at night, and behold, a man was riding on a red horse, and he was standing among the myrtle trees, which were in the ravine, with red, sorrel, and white horses behind him." And that's what the picture is of there. "And I said to the angel who was with him, 'My Lord, what are these?' And the angel who was speaking with me said to me, 'I will show you what these are.' And the man who was standing among the myrtle trees answered and said, 'These are those whom Yahweh has sent to patrol the earth.' And the message they got back after they had patrolled the earth, they reported in verse 11, 'We have patrolled the earth, and behold, the earth is sitting still and quiet.' And the enemies of Israel are at peace, in other words. No judgment is coming upon them. And Zechariah appeals to God about this. "Therefore, thus says Yahweh," in verse 16, "I will return to Jerusalem with compassion. My house will be built in it." And verse 17, "I am very wrathful with the nations who are at ease." Okay. "And he will punish them for what they have done to his people. But he will restore Jerusalem." And again call out in verse 17, "Thus says Yahweh of hosts, my cities will again overflow with good, and Yahweh will again comfort Zion and again choose Jerusalem." And this was a new start for the nation, a new opportunity they had to not do what their fathers had done, but to serve God faithfully, to pay attention to the words of his prophets, and create the kind of society he desired. And we're going to see in coming weeks how well they did with that. Any questions? Yeah. Right. There's going to be a temple during the tribulation. But a good portion of Jerusalem is going to be destroyed and collapsed, especially in the last days of the tribulation. And it is prophesied that Christ himself I mean, Joshua the high priest foreshadowed Christ who would build the temple as well. So putting pieces together, it very much sounds like that temple is going to be destroyed. And in the millennium, there's going to be a brand new one that Christ builds himself. So, anything else? Yeah. They do. Yeah, he does. And this temple actually was defiled as well in a very similar way. We're going to get there pretty soon, actually. And not the whole temple, but at least the altar itself had to be destroyed and couldn't be used after that. And the rededication, the purification of the temple after that point is what the festival of Hanukkah is all about. Actually, it was a big, significant thing for them. Let's go ahead and close. Father, thank you so much for your faithfulness, for always working to bring us back the way that you did for the nation of Israel when we wander from you. Help us to be faithful to you. Help us to remember, to learn from the mistakes of the past. And even if we find new mistakes to make instead, just continue to grow us, continue to teach us, and bring us into line with your will. Bring us into conformity to Christ. Help us to never stop learning, never stop growing closer to you. In Jesus' name, amen.